When it comes to developing a barrel horse, there's one big area of anxiety and confusion and uncertainty for both horses and riders. That area is the rate and shape point, the spot where so many things need to happen so quickly. Now each barrel has this same hot spot. We often pressure ourselves to do just the right thing here as riders. Our timing sometimes gets off, the hesitation and uncertainty both in slow work and in competition runs transfers to our horses, and they end up with the same anxiety and confusion complex as we have about what to do and when in this area. The when, the how, and the where of the action that takes place here is very critical to the success of our barrel runs. But today, I'd like to share an easy way to determine with clarity just what you need to do here as a rider for your horse both at home and in competition to set yourself up for success without stress. What I'll be doing today is helping you develop a plan based on your horse's tendencies, starting by showing an example of one horse with a follow-up video to come later with an example of another horse, both of which happen to be very different. As I do, I'll outline 3 easy steps for making corrections that are sure to create great results. In this video, we'll start by analyzing some footage of my gelding Pistol earlier in his career. His issues on the pattern were ones that were created, number 1, from his natural tendencies, and number 2, from the way I trained him, and admittedly, the mistakes I made on him early in his training. Here is an example of his tendency to not prepare for the first barrel turn so well by going by with his weight still on his front end. Now let's consider what needs to happen here in order for there to be a smooth transition into an efficient and quick turn. The first is that we must remember that when traveling at a gallop, approximately 60% of our horse's weight is on the forehand, with only about 40% on the hindquarters. As our horse prepares to make an athletic turn, he must keep forward motion but change that percentage and put much more weight onto their strong hindquarters. Reason being that in order to really have their legs balanced and properly under their body, it allows them to support themselves through the turn and leave with power. As this happens, the shoulders will actually elevate, allowing the hind legs to really reach under. Essentially, from a longitudinal standpoint, our horse's top line may come to the barrel at a gallop looking a little like this. It's not something you might even be able to recognize, but this is essentially what is happening. In the point they prepare for the turn, we want this. What we don't want is for them to come into the turn with the weight on the forehand and then transfer even more weight as they prepare to turn. How well our barrel horses are able to do this will depend, again, on their natural ability and tendencies, as well as their training and already established habits on the pattern, as well as how we ride them. Now, to get started with problem solving, we'll develop a plan that I call 3x3, or you can call it 3x3 ABC. This plan consists of 3 considerations in 3 areas. So number 1 is what my horse needs to do in his body. Number 2 is where. Number 3 is when, meaning in a run, in slow work, and in our general riding. When we think about what's happening in his body and what needs to happen to create a quick turn and a successful run, that is on the first barrel, we've determined that he really needs to be nailing that shift in weight and taking responsibility for preparing for the turn. As for the where, I'm going to make a point about 12 feet out from the first barrel, my rate and shape point. This gives him a little more room to get his body organized than some horses need, but it's not so far that we'd risk him starting a habit of turning too soon, which we certainly don't want either. The reality is that in order to be competitive, the preparation for the turn needs to happen very quickly. So although I may need to have some considerations based on my horse's tendencies, I also need to have high expectations so that I don't micromanage him or do for him what he needs to be responsible for himself. As for the when, whether in slow work or in a run, this is the point I expect the majority of his physical preparation to be happening. In slow work, I'll ask for it at this spot and expect it to happen pretty much instantly. That doesn't mean though that in a run I won't ride in a way that prepares the position before the transition. When making a run in my body, about a stride before the rate and shape point, I'll sit deep, expect him to start preparing, knowing that I've already educated him on how to respond to my seat, and then boom, there in the next stride is where I actually want it to happen. When he does do a good job shifting his weight back, he tends to lose a little forward momentum. So I'll keep in mind that through the turn to use my body to really pump my seat and encourage him to continue being really forward and free. These are all things I do to a degree in slow work as well, but because we're traveling at a slower pace, I won't actually need to give him as much preparation. The rate and the shape should be able to happen there in one motion easily. So I keep the same things in mind, but can ride a little more subtly. Because of his tendency to go by the first and not get ready in time, I'm always thinking of how our last run might have felt, and I'm aware of how responsive and responsible he's feeling in the moment. Only if necessary would I need to exaggerate that shift to the hindquarters by actually stopping and backing, for example. This isn't something I do with every horse. Again, it's all on a horse by horse, a day by day, and a barrel by barrel basis. As for your general riding, you can almost always expect that there will be the same kind of trouble you have in a run showing up elsewhere, only much more subtly. So in a case like this, I'd make it my goal to really remember to ride my horse's hind end, keep my eyes focused up, and not override with my hands, and to use my seat and body more effectively as I ask my horse to travel with collection, with his body engaged, and really using his hindquarters in general. Your horse is more likely to really use his body well in a run when you've made a habit of asking for that quality movement in general. So we've determined that Pistol needed to be better about preparing his body by shifting his weight back and using his hindquarters across the board. We determined where that rate shape point needs to be and what I must do in my body in slow work versus a run to set us up for success while being ready to make a correction if needed, as well as the things to keep in mind and be aware of in my general riding away from the barrels. Sometimes we're faced with different challenges at each barrel, and in those cases we just need to develop an individual plan based on exactly what's happening and what new habits need to be created. Now, if your horse is pretty solid on the pattern but just needs some minor corrections to speed things up a bit, these steps can really add the icing on the cake, all while supporting your horse's individual style and challenges at each barrel. I hope this will help transform what is typically a stressful hot spot on the pattern into a place where you and your horse can confidently prepare for and execute turns with quickness and ease. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, remember, applied knowledge is power.